All right, we are live. We are transmitting live on YouTube here on the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. I want to thank everybody who is about to join us, but we already have a someone in the chat room, Bionic Belly Button. How's it going? Very, very nice. What a name. So how are you guys? Let me just let everybody know that we had a little fun with this little contest that we had. We pulled out all the stops, but we asked folks if anybody would be interested in taking over the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast for a night for a broadcast, and we got some wonderful folks that wanted to do that. So that is fantastic. Rebel Scum Texas 97 Bravo, Joseph and Rich from the interwebs took on the challenge, and I am so glad that you guys took on the challenge. First of all, I want to thank 97 Bravo for being a patron of the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. Thank you very much, and thanks for supporting us, and thank you for believing in us. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure, man.
So, guys, what brings you on the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast? Why did you guys want to join us and talk to our listening audience here? What's going on? Anybody can start. Let's do it.
I was just I saw the tweet get sent out, and I thought, man, I've been listening to podcasts for the better part of a year now, just here and there on a lot of different ones. And man, I've been a Star Wars fan since I was a kid, so I just wanted to have a chance to talk to some other people about it.
Cool. Yeah. Glad you did that. So
same here for me. I mean, I just started actually Far Away News just this past February. Is kind of a passion project, and I just like he said, I just saw your tweet, and you know, I really love Star Wars, so hope to share my love for it today.
Excellent. Rich, how about you?
Same deal for me. The tweet sounded like more of a fewer people than I thought were going to get invited to it. So I was really excited to try to get into a whole race to see who is invested in the universe. And I know that Twitter, of course, can be very kind to Star Wars lovers. So I wanted to sit there and talk about it for a little while. So I'm down.
Excellent. And thank you very much for stopping by. 97 Bravo. How's it going, brother?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you very much for that tweet. We got to get some people in the chat, but yeah, so you guys are all Star Wars fans. We share that as a common Star Wars family here. Thank you very much for doing so. But what do you guys want to talk about? What's on your mind?
Well, I haven't seen the latest episode of The Mandarin, or Mandalorian rather. So if we could not talk about the last episode, but we could talk about the first four.
No problem.
This episode was good. You need to watch that ASAP, man.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, I
amazing.
tried to get off work early enough to do it before this, but yeah, kids had a
So,
TV.
what do you guys think of the series so far?
Oh man, I mean it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, like Dave Filoni, he started off the series. I mean, probably like perfect. I mean, it drew you right in, and like the writing has been like superb. And then with Deborah Chow with the third episode, I mean, I believe right now it's the most popular TV show in the world from what I just saw. John Favreau has done an amazing job. You can't ask for more.
Yeah, it surpassed Stranger Things as the most watched show. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really been a refreshing show. One fear I had when the show started was that I would actually care about the Mandalorian character with the mask on the whole time. And I think they did a great move adding Baby Yoda to add the heart to it, so you didn't have to rely on the Mandalorian's facial expressions. You get to rely on the music and the dialogue to try to see which characters you care about the most.
Yeah, I was kind of worried about that too. I wasn't sure if I was gonna really enjoy that show as much, just because he doesn't take the helmet off, and then he almost took it off in the I think it was the fourth one. And he almost took it off. And I was like, oh, come on, take it off. And then I'm kind of getting to the point now where it's like, I don't really mind if I don't have to see his face because I am drawn into the story, and I'm excited to see kind of why he doesn't take the helmet off. Because like in Rebels and in Clone Wars, and even Jango Fett, I mean, they're all examples of people who have worn Mandalorian armor, but they take the helmet off. So I'm kind of, just kind of clueless like everybody else is on that, but I'm okay with it right now. I'm just kind of enjoying that.
He took off the helmet in episode 4.
Yeah, but you didn't see his face. That's the thing.
No.
it's-
You're gonna nitpick.
Yeah, but it's funny though.
It's like, I
I
don't care if I don't see his face.
have a theory. I have a theory about that because you mentioned how other Mandalorians have no problem with taking their helmets off. I had a theory about that. What if, when he was rescued as a child, the Mandalorians, that's something that they told him just to keep his identity safe. There's got to be some sort of secret regarding his identity, who he is, based on those flashbacks. He was dressed a little better than like your usual, I don't know, I don't want to like refugee or villager within that realm. So I'm wondering if he's a character of some importance and they're trying to keep his identity secret, and perhaps that's why they told him as a young child, this is our religion, we can never take our helmets off. And they're kind of going along with that all these years to try to keep him safe for some reason. Thoughts on that?
I have a little theory on that, and I don't know if it's necessarily that he's the most important thing, but that the Mandalorians, something must have happened to them in the past 20 years or so that we haven't seen, that maybe there's a new sect or a new religion of the Mandalorians that really are more strict than the ones in the past, because it seems to me that the ones in the past have always failed and been taken over. So I wonder if there's a new group that's taking the helmet a little bit more seriously.
That could be.
I would buy that. It makes a lot of sense. We've seen these flashbacks with him where he's with the family and then the super battle droids show up, and we've seen that stuff. So it's very possible. Yeah, I would buy that.
Maybe it's more because he isn't biologically Mandalorian.
Could be.
So
that too.
a mixture of both what everybody's pretty much saying, but he is, if he were to take off the helmet, other Mandalorians would be able to recognize that he's not a Mandalorian. They changed up the canon on that because there was through the EU, there was a mystique, and yes, they are their own people, but you kind of got the impression that you'd be able to tell looking across the table, oh, that's a Wookiee, that's a Mandalorian. I don't know. I don't know if they're all very similar to the actor who played it in Attack of the Clones. They did change the voice for Boba Fett to match all that stuff in the digital edited series or the movies or whatever later on. I don't know. I think that if he were to take it off, maybe they'd be able to recognize he's not a quote unquote true Mandalorian, even though he walks in the Mandalorian, the lifestyle, the culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because that we see like in Rebels, there's like different sects of Mandalorians, and I wonder if we'll actually find out which group he belongs to and how that's going to play into the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you guys think of the music? I know, I think personally for me, not having a Star Wars TV show and expecting something already in my mind, and once that first episode hit, obviously we had some clues about what the music was going to be like with the trailer. It was very Western, very kind of like rough, kind of like metallic. But I think, and it's my own fault, I did expect kind of like a John Williams-y, grander than most theme. And I think the music I didn't expect it to be as as personal for the Mandalorian as a smaller, thing. But I think it's growing on me for sure. I've been humming the Mandalorian theme around the house, every couple minutes. So it's definitely growing on me. But you know, that theme is also kind of expanding. I think initially we heard sections of it. And as we grow into the show, and as we start to know the Mandalorian a little more, that music is starting to expand also. And I think that's kind of a brilliant subliminal way of kind of going along with for the ride with him, as well as everybody. What do you guys think about the music?
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan at first. You know, the first episode, I was just like caught up in the fact that it's like, oh, it's a Star Wars TV show.
Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't really care too much. And then I watched the second one, and I actually listened to some of the soundtrack too, like on Spotify. And I was thinking, you know what? This is not at all like, to me, I was like, this isn't Star Wars. And what changed my thought on that is if you go back to the Attack of the Clones soundtrack and you listen to that sequence of music from the speeder chase in Coruscant, you know, John Williams originally had an electric guitar that was playing with that orchestra. And I was like, that's weird. Why is that in there?
Yeah.
And then I thought about that after I listened to some of the Mando track. And I was like, you know what? It's possible that they're playing off of that idea and moving it into here. And at the same time, though, to me, it doesn't, at this point, like I said a second ago, I'm so invested in what's happening in this story now that those kinds of things to me are falling in the background. So I guess that's to say that I'm getting used to it.
Sure.
In that sense. And also, you know, like you said, the way that it's developing with the story, I'm like, I can see that because you see progressions in the music, especially in Revenge of the Sith, where you start to really hear those Imperial themes. And it kind of really starts playing. You even hear those rebellion themes as well sometimes in the music that was in episode 3. So, like, I'm seeing some of those. That's kind of where I'm at on the Mando music.
Definitely.
So you're saying pretty much like the music grows as his character, I guess, development grows. You kind of, I guess, the music molds around the Mando, you could say.
I would say that.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the original trilogy, it's just quintessential John Williams. It's beat for beat. Yes, the music's new, but you're getting different plays on the music for the different sequences. But when you listen to all three, you can tell they're part of a family. But then when you get to the prequels, I think that's when John Williams, enough time had gone by where John Williams had done plenty of other things to where he started to play with it. And I think one of my favorite pieces is Duel of Fates. And what he did with that was wholly different from what you could have seen from the original trilogy. Then when you fast forward and you get to the Disney trilogy, as well as the Solo film, or Solo, of course, but I meant the standalone films.
Right.
Rogue One starts different. There's no scroll. It tries to make its own footprint. And the way it starts off and the way the music builds, we only get one beat that is ultimately familiar to us. Yes, it was by somebody else, but was when Darth Vader was introduced, was the blending of the original trilogy, almost as though based off of where Darth Vader is in the movie, it's its own story, and then there's a blending of it when it finally gets to the end and you see Leia there. That sort of blends out. Where Solo, I don't know if you remember the trailers for Solo, but there was a drum, there was a guitar, it was familiar music, but they were using different instruments to play up the fact that it's familiar, but it's different. With The Mandalorian, what I dig is it's first of all, it's 5 years after Return of the Jedi, but it is its own animal. It is completely separate, and yet the different beats, even though the music's different, when it hits and why it hits and what it does while whatever's going on the screen happens, to me, feels very similar. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, was it episode 2 or episode 3, there was a callback to some of the John Williams music. I may be wrong, but I could have sworn that I heard something call back to the original trilogy. But I think ultimately I dig the fact that it's different. I really like that.
Yeah, definitely. Bravo, don't look at the chat. Don't look at the chat.
No spoilers, man.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll let you know, man. But I saw you glancing over there. I'm like, Bravo hasn't seen it yet, so yeah, it's definitely a different animal, and like you guys said, it's I seem like I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to the rhythm. I mean, the first episode right off the bat was like everybody complained it was too short. The music was different. What's going on at the end? People were saying that the first two episodes should have been butted together for a longer first episode. But yeah, as far as what they're trying to do, I get it. The Western, the serial, programming from the olden days, as I like to say. But it's pretty wild having Star Wars on TV on a weekly basis. What do you guys think of the directorial style? And I know, as far as the bigger picture, they're making it so not one director has a certain, I guess, style. They all have their different styles, but one of my biggest complaints, I think, initially in the first couple of episodes were I was missing those wide shots. I was missing the overall look of this world building that we're used to in Star Wars. And I think Deborah Chow, when she came in to direct that, I think was the third episode, I think she really brought it home, and she really reminded us, oh, that's right, we're watching a Star Wars. So I think she did a really good job with those wide shots. I think a lot of sequences of The Mandalorian, even just walking through the town, were really, really rich in texture and layers visually. What do you guys think of that?
I've been loving it so far. I think you kind of nailed it on the head with the different visual shots. And the one thing with the directors that I've been struggling with is they're not allowing you to get comfortable with one style. So they're very different. So in the Village episode with a lot of night shots, a lot of close-ups, and then I know we're not supposed to talk about episode 5 yet, but there was a lot more distant shots and wide shots in that episode. I think there's been just a very inconsistent, but not in a bad way so far.
I just want to ask, Rich, are you sitting on your microphone?
I am not.
Okay, it sounded like a Rancor was sitting next to you.
I heard that one too.
Sounds good. But yeah, it's I think and then 97 Bravo, when you watch this episode later tonight or whenever you have a chance, you'll definitely also see a difference. But chapter 4 was pretty interesting too in the way that you were talking about, but I'm digging it. I can't wait whenever Esposito's character comes in with the Death Troopers. I love Death Troopers.
Oh, definitely. I think that the introduction of Gina Carino, and of course I haven't seen 5 yet, like you've mentioned, but the way it splits off and how he has to rely on other people, and he's not just this, this omnipotent sort of, he has to rely on other people. So in episode 4, where was it 4? No, it's 3, where he starts to get into a scuffle with that big Mandalorian, and then, spoiler if you haven't seen 3, but at the end, everyone who shows up and the clan comes to basically help protect him. Yeah. And I think the fallibility of that is very layered. I think that the ending shot of episode 1 kind of gave us an insight as to, okay, this guy has been tough as nails. Everything we've seen up until this point, he's been smart, he's been tough as nails, he can get himself out of anything, and then he sees the baby and he puts his finger out, and you have that moment of, okay, where is this going to go? Episode 2, the protection of him, okay, and then the big reveal with more of Baby Yoda. He's in a world that he's supposed to understand and he doesn't understand it, or it's been flipped on its head. This one job, all the other jobs, too easy. Put them in carbonite, take them back, get my credits, and then I'm out. And with this one, everything completely changes. And then when he finally goes back in 3 and scoops up, destroys everybody, lets the doctor live, which I thought was interesting because I don't know if have you seen the rumor?
Yeah.
Yes, the
You know,
badge.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's a part of that at least, or at least, they're still around. So that's 30 years or 25 years or something like that after Attack of the Clones. So yeah, I think the intertwining of it all, but the showing him as fallible as best they can without, just like Texan was saying, without taking off his helmet. I mean, we're seeing all these different things, these different emotions are being displayed. And I think each of the directors has been able to put their own piece on it. Now, personally, episode 4 and 2 are kind of I wouldn't necessarily call them fillers, but I thought 1 and 3 really got it to like that sort of hardcore, very Star Wars-y kind of show where regardless, I guess, except for what they were wearing, episode 4, you wouldn't be able to tell, and the ending, of course, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was a Star Wars movie. It was, it could have been Star Trek. It could have just been an episode that they did. So I think that the individual directors, they bring their style, but I like how the underlying theme, the connective tissue that you can tell Jon Favreau, as he wrote it, you can tell that different directors were taken into account and they're allowed to do what they need to bring that story out on the screen. But I think that you can tell, man, you can see that underlying current of Jon Favreau and that the fallibility of the Mandalorian.
There's a vulnerability with his character too that is starting to come out, and actually not starting to come out. We saw it at the end of the first chapter when, like you said, he holds his finger out to the baby. He's connecting more with this child, and he's also in chapter 4. He's connecting with the other children in the village as well. I almost have a feeling that, he was rescued by the Mandalorians as a child. He seems to have grown up fast because of whatever it is that happened to his people. It's almost like the Peter Pan complex where he didn't have an opportunity to become a child, and now he's kind of like stepping back and saying, what's going on with me, and why is this child so important to me? And I'm very excited to try to figure out as the rest of the episodes, as the rest of the series comes out, to find out if that theory is true, or really why he's really enamored by taking care of this child. Why is he curious? Why what they're going to do to this child? Because it's almost like he sees himself in this child, and he's putting himself as the rescuer, just like the Mandalorians rescued him.
I have a theory about that. So, we left off in that episode where his parents hide him, right? And then the super battle droid comes up and rips open the door, and it's just kind of standing there. Well, it's very clear that that's in the middle of the Clone Wars. My thought process is that when he sees that little tiny baby Yoda, whenever he sees the child for the first time, I kind of have a suspicion that it's possible that Yoda, actual Master Yoda, was out in the field somewhere in the Clone Wars and actually rescued that kid. See, I see you down there, Rich. I think that he's responsible for saving the life of the Mandalorian as a child. So the second he sees baby Yoda, it's all like, it's full circle. That's a very Star Wars thing to happen.
Sure.
We always hear George Lucas talk about, it's like poetry, it rhymes. And it's kind of become a joke at this point, but at the same time, like, it's one of those things that's just going to keep on coming around. And the second I saw that, and then I kind of was, driving home one day from work, and I put those two together, I was like, if Yoda doesn't show up in this series, I think it's like kind of I think it'd be great if he did. I don't think, it's just trying to think how to say it. I think it'd be a bad call if Favreau doesn't put Yoda in this series, even in like a tiny flashback. And you know what? The kid doesn't even have to like, end up anywhere real special. To be honest with you, the kid being the Mandalorian as a kid. Like as long as like I see Yoda come up with a green lightsaber and stab a super battle droid in the back, I'm game for it. Just to me, that would make the coolest sense in the world if something like that happened.
Yeah, we got a question from Charles here. Do we think that Baby Yoda is going to be in season 2, or will we resolve that storyline in this first season? I don't know. I think it's too big to resolve at the end of this season. I think definitely he will be in season 2. I think obviously they hit us in the gut with that first shot when Baby Yoda came out and Mando, took his finger out, but we got sucker punched into really wanting more. Plus, who doesn't like the Baby Yoda? He's a cute little guy.
That
Well, I
thing,
think that
Oh yeah.
right now. That little Yoda creature owns the internet right now. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you saw those life-size Yoda things being sold on like GameStop and like Walmart. I think they like come out in May 2020 or something. I made my brother like buy like 4 of them already. $100 right there.
Far from now, man.
Yeah, he's really, really cool. So speaking of Baby Yoda, I mean, there early on there were some people that were saying, "Don't call it Baby Yoda. It's not Yoda. It's just a baby of the Yoda species." What do you guys think? It's Baby Yoda, or do you think it's another of their species?
It is
I
not
think-
Yoda.
no,
It's not Yoda.
No
it'd be
way.
like saying that each of us in our infancy was baby human. I think ultimately that's what they're doing, because we've only seen 2 so far, and as far as canon goes, as far as even Legends goes, we don't know much about the species, and that was on purpose. George Lucas, when they went back and the EU and all that stuff, even with the cartoons and the comic books and those kinds of things, I think ultimately part of the deal, if I'm not mistaken, part of the deal was that there were certain aspects that were off limits with exploring. And when he sells it to Disney, I don't know if that was part of it, but I know for a fact that none of the EU could even go into the backgrounds of some of these characters. Some of them have alluded to things, some of them have added based off of, they've extrapolated from the movies and kind of built their own kind of thing. But I think it's baby human. I think that's basically the equivalent of it, is that's what they're doing, because I mean, Yaddle doesn't really roll off the tongue like Yoda does, and we all know Yoda. Going back one though, I think what's interesting is that instead of the episode that airs right before or the week of The Rise of Skywalker is actually on Wednesday instead of Friday.
Right,
Yeah.
I heard that.
And there's interesting chatter going on as to why that may be. And then the episode that happens the week after Rise of Skywalker comes out, the season finale, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that to be more succinct, I think that Yoda, or this child rather, the kid, will be a part at a minimum of future seasons. And I think that this is going to come to a head with a cliffhanger in the next several episodes, to where, again, I haven't seen 5, so I may be stepping on myself here, may have already been answered, but that the Mandalorians are going to accept this child and completely, totally try to protect it, because not necessarily, and it may be that theory hadn't even crossed my mind, Texan, but as far as the species in and of itself, at this point, either being rare, unique, maybe in all his travels, he's never seen a child like this, but maybe there is a connection. I mean, that would be a logical step, but I don't know. I think that he just, and then again, because he may not be because he's not a full-blooded Mandalorian, maybe there's some force sensitivity there. I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
I totally
maybe.
agree with you about the timing of the episodes, because I saw a theory that said somehow that one scientist, how he's like somehow related to Camino, the cloning facility, is maybe they're trying to find some way, because Yoda, he can live for like 900 years to 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to use that genetic makeup of him to be able to bring back Palpatine. I don't know. Maybe that's the way that's going to go in Episode 9. I don't know. Connect the whole thing together.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is probably one of my favorite theories right now to connect everything is the fact that the longevity of the species in and of itself. Maybe the Mandalorian already knows that and can kind of put two and two together as to why the remnants of the Empire would want it. But yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see a little
Explanation or exposition.
come out and have like a segue into the Rise of Skywalker, and then the week after it sort of ends, and you see this blending where you can tell, yes, it's taking place at a different time than what we used to, but there is a connectivity, a connective tissue between the show and the movies.
Now, it's not totally unprecedented. I know if you guys remember when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did that episode where it kind of really tied into Winter Soldier. So they had an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and right before the release of Winter Soldier that kind of tied a little bit of connective tissue to the cinematic universe for Marvel. And obviously we got Jon Favreau upstairs in the big seat. So I think it wasn't the schedule already released. So they were already talking about how Friday that would have been the release of the episode, and now they moved it to Wednesday to coincide with Rise.
I think the I don't know about that. I think what I was reading and what I saw was the fact that when the schedule was actually released as to when it would be airing, that was already in there. And I'm not sure that at the time that it happened, that anyone kind of put two and two together. It was after it sort of blew up. So when people were looking forward to The Mandalorian, maybe for a while, everyone's just like, oh, it's another Disney production, whatever. But when it blew up was when people really started to dig, just like most Star Wars fans do. They just dig, because they just have to know. And
Sure.
It was just pointed out. It was just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry,
Welcome
I
back,
missed you.
Rich.
I had a really inconsistent audio for a second, so I couldn't get that result.
So we're
Hello,
we're
can you
kind
hear
of
me?
halfway. Yeah, we hear you. We're halfway through the season.
Okay.
What are you guys expecting for the rest of the season?
More jetpacks.
More jetpacks. Yeah.
I mean, the
I
second
actually have a
that
little bit of a theory for the end of the season, and it's kind of dark, but I have a feeling that Baby Yoda is either going to go missing, or we might even have a John Wick situation on our hands where something tragic happens and it motivates for a crazy season 2, because I don't see the season ending unless it's another cliffhanger.
I'm cool with the John Wick thing. I mean, if the child ends up being, it's kind of weird, but to pair it with John Wick's dog, if that's what happens, that will make for and I mean this both figuratively and literally, an explosive season 2. I really think that we're going to see if that's the case, Rich, I think that's going to be, some of the coolest, make for some of the coolest story that we'll see from Mando. Absolutely.
What's
Yeah,
interesting is someone in the chat actually compared The Mandalorian to the old TV show Kung Fu and the way that it was told. Visual storytelling and a quiet lead role, who is legendary in his abilities and belongs to an ancient sect. And I think of all the shows, I mean, that's a perfect, what is that?
Perfect
Hi-fi.
comparison.
Hi-Fi Hedgehog.
Hedgehog.
That's my favorite,
I couldn't read
actually.
that. Yeah, I think the correlation there, I mean, that's probably the closest thing that comes to mind. If not, then it goes back to Gunsmoke or something like that,
Sure.
Even further back. That at least Kung Fu, I've seen a few episodes of those.
And I think half of you guys are too young to remember Kung Fu.
Well,
I
I've
have
seen,
no idea what Kung Fu is. I'll be real with you. I have zero idea.
I've grown up with older shows, so I've seen all of those things.
But yeah, and that's where I think, for us, we're getting used to that kind of style, that storytelling. Talk about kung fu, talk about the westerns, the old samurai films, and then getting back to the time, the length of the shows. Very similar storytelling style. We've seen these main characters, IG-11, Ming Na's character. I started to say something. Sorry, 97.
No, I know there's cameos. I just don't know who it is.
Yeah, it's. Do we think we're going to see folks like IG-88 again? Cara Dune's character. I mean, they kind of like slip in, do their thing, and then they're out of here. But it seems like in all the marketing material, like all three of them are together, like doing their action poses. I think somebody on the internet had said that perhaps at the end of this run that all three of them are going to get back together for one final mission before the season ends. What do you guys think?
I hope that there is a big kind of team up, because that would be really cool. I mean, he would have to go back to whatever that planet was he left IG-11 on, and somebody would have to reassemble him or fix him or something.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, if Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, comes back around, listen, that's all the team up that I need. If it's her, him, and if Nick Nolte's character, the Ugnaught, comes back too on a blurg, that's just an added bonus. But specifically, I would love to see Gina Carano come back in for, if it's not the final episode, at least a major fight or battle that leads up to the final episode, because her character did so much in that fourth episode. And I've seen people go back and forth about it, but honestly, like when it comes down to it for me, she's just awesome. Like she goes in there and handles business, and that's something that I like to see in a show like this, and especially when it comes down to something as I guess normal, or almost to say something that we're used to seeing as a defend the castle or defend the keep or whatever. If it comes down to that, and like Baby Yoda's the child or whatever we're going to call it, I have no idea at this point. But if the defending the keep is defending the child, and everything goes different directions, I would love to see some kind of a team up for sure. I think that'd be fantastic.
As long as your team up includes the heavy Mandalorian trooper with the turret, I'm down.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Was that people are saying that was Jon Favreau?
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Or at least the voice was.
yeah,
That's sweet.
Yeah. And what do you guys are you guys loving the special effects? I mean, for those of us who was at Star Wars Celebration in April here in Chicago? Anybody?
Mm-hmm.
So they had a show reel, and obviously they had a Mandalorian panel where they were talking about the special effects and all the behind the scenes stuff. And anybody that knows me knows that one of the reasons that I love Star Wars so much is because all the talented men and women behind the scenes that are making all this stuff happen. Just, George Lucas's vision just kind of coming to fruition and making all these, the effects, the ships, the props, the costumes, all that stuff is just really, really fascinating for me. And they were talking about how the ILM guys were kind of getting back to basics, creating, the Razor Crest is a model, practical model. They were able to do some really great stuff with miniatures again, just like the olden days back in the day. And it's just a very exciting thing. These guys go in the garage and they start building and machining camera equipment for them to be able to use 35 millimeter film cameras to do flybys. I mean, it's just stuff like that, stories like that I love hearing, especially from these guys at ILM. And obviously, you guys know that we're hanging out with Yoshi Vu, the visual effects artist from ILM here in Chicago on the 17th. We had a lot of fun talking to him about The Mandalorian, and he's also worked on Rise of Skywalker and some other stuff in his past. But it's just a fascinating thing. And then we're getting back to the basics of practical models versus a lot of green screen. What do you guys think of the visuals?
Oh man, they're amazing. Holy crap.
Yeah, you can tell that there's a lot of love and respect for what's come before with everything that they're doing. I mean, I saw just a quick clip of what I think is bounty hunters on speeder bikes going over the sand, and just that simple shot, I thought it just brings me back to my childhood when seeing I didn't watch A New Hope in the theaters, but Empire Strikes Back, even undigitally altered, it just was larger than life. And I think that the speeder bike chase and Return of the Jedi, especially being a kid, I think I was in third grade or something like that. It was phenomenal. It was something that I had never seen before. And then of course the prequels, where the vast majority of everything that's behind them is CG. I think The Mandalorian does a fantastic job of bringing back the practical effects and building actual stages and having them walk in sand and those kinds of things. I think that's probably why there's not a whole lot of establishing shots, because the intricacy of making a village or making a town around, especially where I forget his name, where the doctor and the client, where they were, to make that a fleshed out town. I think that would probably be expensive or time consuming or whatever, but to keep it tight. But those establishing shots, especially in the pilot or the first episode, and then in episode 3, I thought they did a fantastic job, especially with the finale of episode 3, where they had that top shot and you're looking down and you can see the battle actually going on. I thought that was pretty cool. The episode 4 was kind of tight too, but I think the special effects, when the ATST came out of the forest, I really wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to Alex about that scene, especially when the walker was chasing them through the forest, and the forest kind of seemed like a Star Trek set for me. Like visually, I almost wanted to see the Star Trek fighting song. The dun 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 dun. But
Actually, a lot reminded me of the Jurassic Park chase scene.
Wow,
the eyes are red going into it.
Yeah. Did you see the other Jurassic Park throwback? And obviously, Bryce Dallas Howard directed that. And but did you see the other callback where the camera kind of tilts up and you see the footprint of the walker that they're looking at in the ground? I almost expected them to show a shot of water like rippling. That would have been too much.
Too on the nose.
You just see Baby Yoda come out, and I mean, it's done.
So I put something on the screen here. Star Wars for Dummies says practical effects and mixed with CGI is what he prefers. There is definitely, something to be said for well done CGI. Obviously, we've all seen, the difference between, not so well done CGI versus the stuff that you really don't notice. And, talking with Yoshi Vu is one of the things that he says, the best CGI or special effects is the one that you don't notice. So, we might be seeing a lot of stuff that we're not really registering as, our eyes only register the bad stuff. But I think they're doing a really, really great job. And 97 Bravo, you gotta hit us back when you're ready to see that first the last episode, because the opening scene is really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it right after this. I thought, in all honesty, after episode 1, so I watched it with my wife and my youngest daughter. I could have sworn that Baby Yoda was CGI. I could have sworn.
So
I thought it was fantastic CGI.
Yeah,
but CGI nonetheless. And then, what was it? It wasn't episode 2. I think it was going into episode 3. Excuse me. That we got word that the actor who plays the client called the special effects guys cowards for wanting to make him CGI. And then all of a sudden it starts coming out. He's a puppet. I don't know. I think episode 2, you get that. I thought they were meshing it, doing both a puppet and CGI to sort of get, the eyes and stuff. And they may be tweaking it a little bit.
Yeah.
But after episode 1, I was convinced that was CGI.
Yeah.
They did a great job.
That reveal with the blanket and he comes over, I'm like, that's really good CGI.
Oh yeah. I was fooled. I was totally fooled. I think
Yeah.
the Star Wars you expected.
Sure.
You've seen the trailers for the Rise of Skywalker, and they're battling on the remnant of the Death Star, and you got the waves, and that is quintessential Star Wars. Way up to the top with
Sure.
how they do their special effects. I mean, there have been some things that, well, the special editions of the original trilogy with Jabba and those kinds of things, you're like, oh, that's bad. But
I have a quick question about
we've
that
come
movie.
to expect so much more that's what I was expecting was, CGI Yoda. But Puppet Yoda's cool too. Much
Yeah.
better than the original Phantom Menace puppet for
Oh,
Yoda.
God.
Oh man,
We're-
that's your worst nightmare right there.
What were you gonna say?
That's a whole nother podcast, man. So
Rich, were you going to say something a second ago?
yeah.
What was that?
Were you going to say something a second ago?
Yeah, I was a little bit off topic, but one thing that echoes in the Rise of Skywalker trailer that reminded me a lot, because of course we're all doing our rewatches of the old movies and the prequels and all that. But as I'm watching the Revenge of the Sith in the past 2 weeks, the lava fight where they're climbing on the towers and falling down through the lava volcano and the waterfall and all that non-craziness, I'm wondering how much of the Rise of Skywalker fight is also going to have that payoff last battle.
Yeah, no, like I get you. Like that's one thing I like about J.J. Abrams is, at least when I watched Episode 7 and Episode 8, I think I might be wrong on this, but I believe Rian Johnson used a little bit more CGI than J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams, his mentors like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, those guys are known for practical effects, and I'm really excited for Rise of Skywalker because at least from what I've seen, it looks you can see that it doesn't have that look of more CGI. It's more practical effects.
It's interesting because it seems like we're coming full circle. I mean, George Lucas obviously was known for being a filmmaking innovator. There were interviews of him saying that I'd like to, even after the special editions, he said, I'd like to, maybe do more Star Wars, but the technology is not up to par with my standards. I won't be able to tell the story my way. So it's very interesting just to kind of get those kind of comments from George Lucas. And we know he likes to tinker with his stuff. I don't fault him for it. Some of the things that he did, okay, I understand. Also, from a behind the scenes perspective, like I am, I like seeing that. I like trying to have Star Wars be kind of a vessel to push the envelope for filmmaking, and it has, tenfold. But sometimes, Han Solo walking over Jabba's tail might be a little iffy. But what do you guys think about Star Wars being kind of a force of change, so to speak, as far as filmmaking goes, as far as how we see movies in the future?
Well,
When I was growing
go ahead.
up, sorry, man. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to because George Lucas, and I looked up to George Lucas. I thought he was the coolest thing in the world, which really, when you break it down, he's kind of a dorky dad. But,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a filmmaker like him. So I made sure I was knowing things. Like, I wanted to see how all the behind the scenes things worked. And so from the point of I was in the 5th grade all the way through high school and even into college. And even now I'm just I have to watch the behind the scenes so I can know how they do these things. And so going all the way back to seeing just some of the simple models, like the Empire of Dreams documentary. I wore that DVD out. I watched that over and over. I fall asleep watching that. So I need
You know what's funny? Before you finish, I hate to interrupt you. You wore the DVD out, but I'm old enough. I wore the VHS out.
was the VHS from Star Wars to Jedi. That VHS.
And now
I
it's
have
Disney Plus.
that VHS. But no, I remember watching that. So I had to see all that work. So the fact that we've seen how the prequels had so much CGI in it, especially 2 and 3. And, I was a kid, so it was flashy, and flashy's cool when you're a kid. Now I kind of I appreciate how much headway was made in that technology because, without stuff like that, we don't get some movies like some huge movies like Transformers and stuff like that now. So to see it coming, like you said, full circle to using the practical effects and using the CGI and taking the best of all of these different worlds to make the best story visually, that's the payoff. And I think that's the ultimate way to respect George Lucas. I think that because that's what I think his vision was all along, as you were saying just a second ago. At least a part of it.
Definitely, yeah. We got.
One thing to give them credit though, they're still moving forward with Rogue One. I mean, they brought Tarkin back to life and a young Leia. They're still really impactful in the community, especially ILM and what they've always done.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of ILM, if you guys have not seen The Irishman on Netflix, there's a behind-the-scenes story of how that film and the de-aging technology has been furthered by the guys at ILM. It's an incredible story. Again, just, all these guys that do all this research and development on how to be able to tell a story a lot more seamlessly, especially with these actors. When it calls for them to be their younger selves, it's an amazing thing. I think Rogue One did some fantastic work, and they're continuing that effort. But like I said, if you guys have not seen young De Niro in The Irishman, go check it out.
That's on my list.
Yeah.
I just actually finished it last night.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Who's in the chat room? We got Salty Nerd. How's it going, Salty? What is happening? Let's see. Oh, Trevor Beast 454. Thanks for joining us. So he's got a question, and he's been on the podcast a couple of times already, talking to us about Star Wars. So he says this may be a long shot, but do you think we can see Maz Kanata in The Mandalorian, perhaps in season 2, or a mere mention of her? Never say never. I think this. I had a theory, but you guys can talk about seeing Maz Kanata in Mandalorian. But who knows? Could happen.
I don't think she was as much of a hit as Lucasfilm thought she would be, to be honest with you. I know my kids watch Star Wars on repeat with me, and they don't really have an attachment to Maz Kanata the way that they do to even Yoda or even Baby Yoda. My daughter screams when Baby Yoda's on. She never did that with Maz. And I thought Maz was a cool character, but I don't know if it was impactful enough to force her into a Mandalorian show.
I personally, and I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes, but I think there were a lot of characters that were wasted in The Last Jedi. And I think hers in particular was one of those where there was have you guys read the book for The Force Awakens?
No.
So there's there's a sequence that obviously wasn't in the movie, but as the First Order is coming down on her castle, Maz Kanata, they're escaping from a tunnel. They kind of allude to in the movie, they show them coming up, but there's a moment where she pulls down the roof on a bunch of stormtroopers, uses the Force as it were, but she's not a Jedi. So she says in the movie, I'm no Jedi, but there was something there in the book, and I think it was intended. And then there was just a sharp turn off the highway with The Last Jedi. There were several characters. My oldest daughter, who's the Star Wars fan, my youngest is just starting to get into it. She noticed the disconnect between the two movies, and she wanted to see more of Maz. So with The Force Awakens, there was a lot of openings with the different characters, and I think that seeing Maz from The Force Awakens in her setting of, I've had this castle for 1,000 years, and all the scum and villainy that go along with that. I think that, I don't know, it might be pretty cool to see her show up in The Mandalorian. I think she'd fit of all the new characters. I think she'd fit.
In there.
Yeah, she is in that trailer. Like if you break it down in that big crowd shot, she's like,
oh yeah,
on the right hand side. Yeah.
She's next. Isn't she next to Mr. Snuffleupagus in that one shot?
But it makes more sense for her to be in that movie than The Mandalorian. That was kind of my major point.
But because she's been a part of, apparently a part of this universe for somewhere around 1,000 years or more, own that one little watering hole. And it is a place where we saw, the First Order and the Resistance, they had their own spies in there. It makes perfect sense for Mandalorian to show up there. Not only that, but, the Child and Maz, they both apparently know the Force. It would make a lot of sense for, Maz to show up because she could be some kind of almost kind of like a spirit guide or something to help Mando. Because, at this point, there's only really one Jedi in the universe, and that's Luke Skywalker. And the chances of us seeing Luke Skywalker in Mandalorian are like slim to none. In my opinion, I may be wrong, but, it can happen.
Yeah. What about, we're getting a lot of, throwbacks, especially with the ancillary material, the comics, the novels, all this stuff that ties the rest of the universe together. Are you guys tired of seeing, like, I don't want to say retconning certain story aspects, but do you guys want to see new characters and new fresh situations come about from a Star Wars? Or are you guys okay with seeing a lot of, I don't want to call it fan service, because sometimes it is fan service, but sometimes it's like, oh, it's really cool. I see this and I recognize it. Do you guys want like brand new stuff, or are you guys okay with the way they're doing things?
I think the way that The Mandalorian is starting.
The 40 years.
I'm sorry, I was talking over him. I think the way The Mandalorian started with everything was new. You can tell that it was different, but there was just enough peppering of throwbacks to make it familiar. It didn't drop anchor on and try to create a story based off of some information that we already knew about Star Wars. It took the universe of Star Wars and introduced all these new characters, but in just some of the panning shots, the stuff that's going on in the background, the different characters that you see, and there's videos all over YouTube of all the Easter eggs and things. But I sort of dig the idea that, much like Rogue One was very much its own story, but at the same time, yes, it was about the Death Star, but the characters in and of themselves were new to us. And to see them blend seamlessly, the two guys who are on Jedha, they show up and we don't know anything about they're recreating sort of the history of it, and we don't know anything about Jedha, and yet through these two guys we get this want and desire for more information about Jedha and the temple that was there and those kinds of things. But yeah, no, I like the blending. I like the new, but at the same time, I like how The Mandalorian is. It's just got that peppering of it feels like the original trilogy, not so much the prequel trilogy, but it feels like it deserves to be 5 years after the original trilogy.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Rich, I stepped on you there, man.
No, you're good. Like I said, my mic's a little bit behind anyway, so I gotta make sure I wait my turn. One thing I mentioned is I want something outside of the Skywalker Saga timeline, whether it be forward, which is going to be hard until they resolve 9, but I want to see something where we don't necessarily know how it has to end for the whole galaxy. I still want it to be large enough to be planet changing, but outside of where's Luke, where's Leia, where's our heroes from the last 40, 50 years.
Sure.
I kind of like how they're doing new stuff because, as much as I love the original trilogy and as much as I love the prequel trilogy, there is a need, I think, sometimes for things to be made new. I think that as people, we would agree with that in our own lives. And, I think it just makes sense in a story. Like if you want to connect people to a story, sometimes it just needs to be made new. And I don't mean like throw the old playbook out completely because that'd be absurd with Star Wars. But at least visiting another piece of the timeline to have some newer content, whether it's way after 9 or way before 1. To me, it's just makes sense to go to a new route. But the way that they're peppering things in, like you were saying just a minute ago, Seven, that it just makes sense that they would do some things like that. I'd be okay with seeing that.
Yeah. And they're definitely doing that. I think they want to be able to try and, connect this galaxy, this universe, this storyline together with a few characters, even some new characters that we are just meeting, like what's that? The treasure hunter comic book girl. Yeah, Dr. Aphra.
Right.
So yeah, I don't have a major problem with it. I think there's something in the Captain Aphra book lately that Brad had an issue with regarding kind of adding a new take on a familiar story. I'm not sure what that is, but books like Lost Stars and things like that are really great examples of how you take the story that we know and just kind of flip it on its side and just kind of look at it from another perspective. And I think when they do that without too much pandering, without too much fan service and spoon feeding, I think that's when that's when the stories succeed. Don't you guys agree?
Oh, for sure.
Very much so.
Lost Stars is one of my favorite books I've ever read, and one thing is I always advertise to people is they didn't make the Empire out to be pure evil. Everybody was their own person within the Empire, and it gives them all their own slightly different identities. So the Alderaan explosion, to me, I always reference people who don't really read as much of the canon, is like that really connected me to, not everybody has to be evil. They're just doing their jobs at a certain time in a certain place. And we do get a lot of that content with all the new canon that comes out. It's been a lot of enjoyable stuff. So not to say I completely want to get out of the Skywalker saga, but I do love that they have those interconnections and, like you said earlier, ways to make it punctuate and make them all make sense to each other.
Yeah, I agree. We're not evil. We're just doing our job, man.
Right.
Well, it's very similar because it wasn't the Empire based loosely on the Nazis.
Sure.
And that's pretty much what it came down to is, you had the troops
Right.
on the ground, you had the higher ups who were, your Tarkins and your Vader, those kinds of things where they're true believers and they're hardcore. Yes, you're going to have troops that are hardcore as well because, the Empire was famous for being, I guess racist or speciesist or whatever it is. They didn't have any non-humans. And the major thing with Thrawn was that they were able to accept him. Well, the Emperor was able to accept him. There was a lot of, especially through the new books, the hate and discontent for the Chiths and those kinds of things. But yes, there can be a human side to all of that. But at the same time, they're afraid. If I speak up, if I don't do this, I'm going to be killed because Vader just killed an admiral right behind me. And who am I? I'm just pushing buttons over here. I think the Finn aspect of it was extremely interesting, and I think that it could have been. In hindsight, I just wish he wasn't a garbage guy. I wish he wasn't a janitor. I wish that. Because, the thing that got me was we don't find out he's a janitor, of course, until later. But wait a minute, what are you doing on Jakku? How are you part of that mission? How are you? They're not just going to scoop up the janitor and
they were
hey,
going
we need more.
They were going to clean the
guys.
toilets in the village.
Were they? Is that what?
Yeah.
I missed that part.
But you're absolutely right. I think they had a really, really unique opportunity to write Finn in a better way. And I think they blew it. And I think they chose to go for the laughs instead of the substance. And I think that's what made The Force Awakens, at least that storyline, kind of fail, because after that, it was like, who cares? He's a janitor. How does,
Well,
how to-
I'd like to add to that, though.
Yeah.
Because there's something that's very clear, and it's a very clear message, at least to me, and I imagine there's several others. It's a very clear message that these newer movies, especially 7, 8, and 9, they're all about, seeing something deeper into a character. And what I mean by that is, yeah, Finn was like he works sanitation, but like I think to me that really says that, you know, it doesn't really have to matter where you're from, but you can ultimately make a difference, whether it's small or as big as, you know, as Rose said in episode 8, the Finn, which I thought was dumb, but I won't talk about that. I still think that it's just this very clear message that you don't have to be some big name person to make a change. Like, you don't have to be a boy. You don't have to be
Right.
you don't have to be a Luke Skywalker. You can be garbage man, you know, like you can be that guy or that lady who can make a difference. And I think that's the really cool message with Finn specifically, as far as, so what, he works sanitation. He's still there getting stuff done. Like, and yeah, you can see, I see both sides of it. I really do. I see where it's like, it is, to a part of me, it's like, yeah, you know what? He could have been something really cool. Like, he could have been some kind of Imperial or a First Order shock trooper or something crazy like that. But at the same time, to like be something as simple as a garbage guy, to take that and say, okay, now let's make this guy a hero. How do we do that? You know, you even look at Rogue One, we see Bodhi Rook. I mean, he's a pilot. That's all he is. He's a cargo pilot. There's nothing special about him. Yet he holds one of the major keys to the destruction of the first Death Star. You know, some simple things can snowball into great moments in stories and in life. And I think those all play together. So not to like totally step on y'all's toes, because I don't mean to do that at all. I just think it's important to see another perspective. You know what I mean?
No, I think it's very
hashtag blocked.
yeah, cancel you, man. But you know, I think Finn had the opportunity to have a very similar story to Luke and Rey, where they come from obscurity, and you know, within a very short period of time, relatively short period of time, their name should be, you know, just shouted from the mountaintops as going against the Empire with Luke, and then of course going against the First Order with Rey. Finn was very much Finn, and then of course Broom Boy and those kinds of things. It is a message that the Disney trilogy is really trying to drive home, because even with the EU, it was bloodlines. You know, you had Anakin Skywalker, and you had Jason and Janus, Anakin Solo and Jaina and Jason Solo. So that comes from Leia's bloodline. But then you had Ben Skywalker, and they were really strong in the Force and that kind. But they kind of really talked more about the bloodline. Of course, this is prior to Episode 1 coming out, where that was kind of, you know, the midichlorians and those kinds of things, where it was completely changed. I think that the importance of Finn, well, I got to say that going back to how I thought Episode 8 was going to be based off of talking about The Force Awakens for 2 years, was that something was going to happen with Finn. And I go back to a very poignant moment where you have Finn, he has that moment of crisis and he puts his weapon down, but then as Kylo Ren is exiting and he's as Kylo Ren is heading towards his shuttle, he, for whatever reason, looks over and he looks directly at Finn, who they share this moment. It just appeared like there could have been a setup, like there could have been so much more to Finn along those lines, that making him a janitor just sort of, it doesn't cheapen it, but to your point, I think that they played it to laughs. And I think that that's what they were looking to do, is when his job was finally revealed, what he did, that is much like Han's reaction. I think my reaction to it was much like Han's reaction, like, wait a minute, how do you know these things then? Not that it was a wasted character. I would have liked to see, from what I understand in Rise of Skywalker, he has a much meatier role, and I think JJ is going to get back to kind of the idea that he had for Finn in later movies, but I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes it's disappointing. I like watching The Force Awakens to see that, you know, get back to that new feeling of meeting Finn for the first time and what's this guy about, and everyone made a big deal of, oh, the stormtrooper's black. That wasn't the thing to focus on. The thing to focus on was the fact that This is a guy who's been programmed since he was a child, taken away from his family, and there's something in him that he knows it's wrong, and he has to get away. And I thought that was intriguing.
It's definitely intriguing because it again, it plays to that core value of Star Wars, the whole redemption, the aspect of, right versus wrong. And George Lucas, obviously he had a pretty linear vision of right and wrong. And I think you're right. They definitely could have done a little something more with that.
I would have enjoyed that, yeah. I mean, even after The Force Awakens, it was, okay, did The Force Awakens... we're led to believe The Force Awakens because of how the story goes and eventually ends, that The Force awakened in Rey. But that moment I keep going back to where Kylo looks over and he sees Finn and they kind of share that moment. Almost, I think it's 2 scenes after that, Kylo is in the throne room with Snoke, and Snoke says, "Did you feel it? There's been an awakening." And you're like, wait a minute, if you view it through a different prism, are they talking about Finn? And so there was a group of us that were excited and sort of following those theories that, they're going to make Finn force sensitive. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for a while, the internet was abuzz about that. But he's a janitor.
Yeah.
We need more Matt the Radar technicians in Star Wars. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's unfortunately we all know that lightning doesn't strike twice, and there's something special about the original trilogy that we're trying to kind of relive through every new Star Wars that we try and kind of look at it again with our 7-year-old eyes when we first gazed upon the story of Star Wars. It's not going to happen, but now that we're older and wiser and more critical of things, but Star Wars is still in our blood, and this obviously demonstrates it. You guys with your interest in talking about Star Wars, and we're still doing it 40 plus years later. I think it's just an amazing thing.
I agree.
I think it's a testament to George's original vision. I think in 77, when A New Hope came out, him getting out of the Directors Guild because he wanted to shoot it a certain way, and not having the credits at the very beginning, and he had this whole vision, and he just said, "You know what, Hollywood, I'm going to do my own thing." The creation of ILM and Skywalker, what turned into Skywalker Sound, it speaks volumes. It speaks testament to he had a vision. I mean, you don't really hear about things like this in Hollywood too much anymore, but he had a vision, and he literally was willing to ruin his reputation on this one movie because he had a vision and he had to have it. It had to be executed the way he needed it to be executed. And the original trilogy, think what you will about Ewoks, but the original trilogy was certainly that way. Like he had this plan, and I don't know. It's just it's a total testament to what he's doing. To say that, Luke, because I've read Luke's boring, and it's just to be down on the original trilogy when there were a lot of people who were wanting more of the original characters in the Disney trilogy. To see that fight that goes on, that verbal fight that goes on, as far as destroy the past, let it die if let it die if it needs to. That sort of idea. I don't know. It would have been nice to have more of the original cast as it moved forward, but I think the testament to Star Wars in and of itself is that it literally crossed all boundaries. You had people from different economic backgrounds in different areas of the country, the different areas of the world. If I walked around with this, in the poorest of poor, I guarantee you people know. They'll look and, hey, you just see it. There's a little smirk, you're walking through the mall or whatever have you. Hey, cool shirt. Hey, right on. And there's just this, without getting too deep as to how people feel about what's going on now, there's just a camaraderie. And that's something that growing up, especially around the prequels and the EU universe as far as books and comics. It was something that it was really cool. It was really cool to experience. And you know, we went, my oldest daughter and I, we went to Florida, Orlando, for the 40th, the celebration that was in Orlando in 2017. Oh, I'm looking at this, by the way.
Yeah.
So that was our. So we flew out there, and it was amazing. The how excited people were. Of course, this was in April of 2017, before Last Jedi came out. Just being there and what people would do, wearing the hats, and you know, he's got two guys with different hats here, and same thing. It was just amazing to be in the vicinity of people like that, sharing Star Wars. You know, the one thing that, regardless of everything else going on in our lives, just sit down and just talk about Star Wars. And you don't know anything else about the person, and you don't necessarily need to. You just you're friends for life, man.
I don't know how many times I'm walking down the street and I see somebody with a Star Wars shirt on, and I just want to look at them and go.
Right. That look across the table, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was 4 years old when Phantom Menace came out, and I'm sorry if I'm making y'all feel old, but my dad took me to the midnight premiere over near Dallas, Texas, and we saw that together and with a big group of people. But I remember when the fanfare came on and the Star Wars logo came up, my little 4-year-old self just double fists in the air, screaming how much I love Star Wars. And even now, if that fanfare comes on, I'm watching the movie, a huge smile comes across my face. And you're right, you're right. The camaraderie amongst fans, the camaraderie that I have with friends that like I go to church with, or family members or stuff like that. How I talk about Star Wars with people and how they talk about it with me, and how, you're right. You don't have to know anything else about anybody just to enjoy something as simple as a movie. It's incredible that it has come this far and it's come along this long, and that we get to do things like this and we get to have these kinds of discussions. It's really cool, and I think it totally surpasses a lot of what George Lucas maybe even intended. But at the same time, so cool that that's what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think we lost Rich too.
Yeah. Sorry, Rich.
But it's I mean, just a couple of guys talking Star Wars, and it's just like 97, like you said, man. It's a camaraderie. It's a thing that's instantly recognizable. You can go to any third world country and flash that logo, and you're set, man. I mean,
I've been, man, in Africa, Central and South America, even in the Middle East. I've seen the smallest, tiniest things that I'm like, wait a minute, how do you know?
right.
Just completely removed, but it's fantastic. It transcends languages and religions and political affiliations and everything. It's just people can identify it. It's a root story of not only family, but like you were saying a lot earlier, the definitive good versus evil. Yeah. And I think that just resonates.
So Alex, Brad, and I we just finished recording a couple nights ago our next podcast episode, and we entitled it Balance of the Force, or Legacy of Balance. And we talk a little bit about that. We talk about how, what does it mean to have balance in the Force? And we talk a little bit about the personal nature of that statement, and everybody has their idea of what the Force is, as far as how the movies talk about balance of the Force and stuff like that. And George Lucas getting back to his notion of good and evil, and all the things that he has said through all the interviews about why he introduced the Force and his interest in human nature and religion. And he pulls a little bit from each religion to kind of make a composite of this belief in the films. We're going to be putting that together this weekend and most likely releasing it next week. I hope you guys take a listen to that podcast. But again, like you said, man, 97 Bravo, you're talking about how, Star Wars brings people together. And I think you're right. It's just a testament to his storytelling and just, he hit a nerve, man. He hit a nerve that goes deep within everybody that enjoys this franchise. Like you said, whatever it is that you feel about what's going on with the franchise, but I think deep down it's in our blood.
Yeah, and I think that there are divisions. I think as Star Wars fans, we can't help but notice that as the internet has become more relevant in our lives, that it's a different way of viewing Star Wars now than it was even when the prequels came out, because the internet was in its infancy when the prequels came out. But there are divisions. But deep down inside, I think that within all fans, whether some of them will admit it or not, we want the best for Star Wars. I wanted so bad for The Mandalorian to be good that I stayed away from learning. I just saw the trailers and I said, okay, I need to see that. I need to get Disney Plus. But then I stayed away from everything else. With Rise of Skywalker, well, actually with all 3 Disney trilogy films, I tried to find out as much as I possibly could. And with Force Awakens, it didn't ruin anything. I knew there was a leak that came out which pretty much told the plot line, but I wanted to see it. And even with The Last Jedi, there was another leak, and I read it and went, okay, I don't know exactly where this is going. But the actual visual aspects of it, of taking my daughter to the theater, and like you were saying before, the fanfare starts and the scroll, you just know you're in a Star Wars movie. And everyone around there, everyone in the theater was excited to see what we were going to be presented with. And with The Mandalorian being as different as it is, but still familiar, it's a testament. You throw Baby Yoda up on the TV, man, and all of a sudden these 2 warring parties are like, oh, well, maybe it's not that bad. And they start coming back, and now they have something to talk about. Let's talk about Baby Yoda. They're not talking about, what they think may be wrong with the Disney trilogy. Now they're talking about Baby Yoda. And it's just this, it's amazing. It's amazing to see. I've actually been not spying, but overhearing people at different tables out and about at lunch or whatever in the last couple of weeks since The Mandalorian came out, and to hear people, I'm ordering coffee for a bunch of people at work, and sitting at a table was, a couple 20 or something, 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, whatever have you, and Baby Yoda this and Baby Yoda that. And I'm overhearing it because it's right behind me, and I'm just smiling to myself like, yeah, I think the magic, there's a magic there that hasn't completely gone away, and ultimately we just want the best for Star Wars because, growing up, I was a little older than 4 when the episode 1 came out, but it's the same feeling, man, to see it, I don't know, up on the big screen, to see it visualize and actualize in front of us instead of just having, what did we have, like 20 years of books or something like that before, 25 years, I guess. I don't know. It's just really cool. It's really cool to experience. And it's one of those things that, yeah, there are subjects that you sort of tiptoe around when you're trying to be polite, and you just talk about, so what's your favorite movie? And then they say, and you're like, that was okay. Well, let's talk about this. It's fun.
Yeah, like just the other night, my wife and I had a friend of ours over for dinner, and she had never seen. She's the same age as me and my wife, but she'd never seen any Star Wars. And then she knows I'm a big Star Wars fan, and she goes, "So what's up with Baby Yoda?" And I was like, "Well, it's this TV show," and I was like, "What do you know?" And she's like, "Well, I know about Luke, and I know about Vader," and I was like, "Okay, well, did you want to watch anything?" And she was like, "Well, I'd like to see the very first one." And so we ended up watching about an hour of episode 4. And I didn't intend to show her an hour. She was like, let's keep watching. She's 23 years old, and she's sitting here like enjoying it. And I'm trying to tell her, it's like, okay, to understand Baby Yoda, you got to watch all of this. And that's a huge undertaking for somebody. but at the same time, it's like the payoff is so worth it. And I think we all know that. I think all of us know that if you're a diehard fan like we are and doing stuff like this, we know that it's worth it. Just to echo what you said, man, that it just overhearing people talk about it and having conversations about it and watching and listening to what they say and how they react to it. It's so cool. It's just so cool. And it's like, I love that line that Cassian says in Rogue One where he says, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. You know, I grew up in a small town in South Texas and people like did not understand Star Wars. Therefore, they did not understand me. And so I always resonated with that line as soon as I heard it. And then all of a sudden, Star Wars is huge again. And you hear people like, oh, I love Star Wars. I'm like, dude, I remember you 10 years ago saying you were making fun of me for watching Star Wars. So, like, don't even stuff like that. That it's like, okay, not only is it just relevant now, it's actually people are realizing, oh, this is something meaningful here. It's bigger than they realize, I think. And it's a testament to how far the story's come. It's a testament to the work that George Lucas and everybody else who's ever been involved with any one of the 11 or 12 movies that have come out now. Their work that's gone into it has just been, it kind of has the icing on the cake, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It definitely is icing on the cake. I mean, I remember back in the 90s when there was absolutely no Star Wars, after even before the special editions, we call that the dark times, but I thought that was it. And now we're getting Star Wars out of every orifice. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. And we're meeting, we're meeting a lot of great people that have commonality with Star Wars. So it's really great. It's really great. So we might have lost Rich in the long run. I hope he's able to maybe join us next time. But any closing thoughts, you guys, on this phenomena that we call Star Wars?
I have closing thoughts, but I want y'all to go first.
Why don't we let Joseph go?
Oh,
Yeah, do it.
all right. Well, I actually just watched Empire of Dreams this a couple weeks ago for the very first time. Wow. Let's just say I got a little bit emotional during that because it just like really just like it's like how people say it's Star Wars is a cultural phenomenon. And that saying there's so much meaning into that term cultural phenomenon where George Lucas he takes bits and pieces from different cultures and blends it into one big overarching story that everyone can relate to. And I think that's why there's so many millions of people that love it and why it's been going for 42 years now. And I go to college and almost every day it's like I'm so obsessed with Star Wars now that I can like find something to relate every conversation back to Star Wars. I'm like, oh yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, definitely.
My turn. All right, let's do it. Final thoughts for me. When I look at Star Wars, I grew up in a great household, but my parents are still together, and not everybody gets that. But I have these amazing moments where I've been able to resonate a lot with my dad. In fact, today my dad went to an estate sale, and he calls me and he goes, "Hey, they've got Star Wars action figures here from '77. Do you want them?" And here they are.
Nice.
They're right here, and I can't help but just think, man, it's cool that my dad has passed this on to me. And then when Last Jedi came out, now I know there's all kinds of opinions about Last Jedi, but my mom sat next to me in that movie, and when Yoda showed up on the screen, she starts grabbing at my arm. Look! I'm like, shut up! I'm trying to watch it. And she's excited for me. She's excited. It's just these really cool things where I've been able to see how cool it is to see. It's just passed down, and it's going to be continually passed down. And that's what's so cool to me. So ultimately, it's really cool to see how I can think like my parents for things like that, and other relatives, of course. And just ultimately, it's just been it's cool. Like if I die, tomorrow, And all I ever had that I could say that if there's like a tangible, like inanimate thing in the world that I can say I cared about the most, people are going to know that it was Star Wars. And aside from, that, there's a lot of other things I would hope people will remember me for. But like that right there, it's like, I'm okay with being remembered as the Star Wars geek.
Sure.
And I'm okay with that. And I'm just really happy that that's what's happened in my life when it comes to Star Wars.
No, that's really interesting. I don't mean to interrupt if anyone else was trying to talk, but how that one quote, 1,000 generations live in you now. I mean, that's almost kind of, kind of similar to what you talk. It's, there's like all these older generations of Star Wars fans that are now coming together with new generations. And it's like, I feel like the sequel trilogy is kind of like that combination of all those. I mean, episode 9 is going to be really emotional for me. So,
yeah. 97.
Liking it as a kid and reading the books and everything, I was the soldier in the army that was reading Star Wars books. And my friends were like, what is that? Then the prequel trilogy comes out, and it sort of, I don't know, it sort of grew from that because, a lot of them apparently didn't grow up with Star Wars, and I feel bad for them and their families. But moving forward with, I've just always been a fan. I mean, I've known my wife since we were 15, so that's 30 years ago. We've been married for 20, and she just doesn't care. She's never connected. She's just like, oh, that was a good movie. That's it. What about when so-and-so did this and that? And what? I don't know. And I don't get it, but it was passed down to, like I said, my youngest daughter who's 12, she's starting to be interested. But my oldest daughter, who's 15, it just clicked. It was like it was in the DNA, and to watch that, and with Force Awakens, I took her to see it, and then we went and had lunch and started a tradition, and the family connection. It's a family movie, but the connection that fathers and daughters, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, the whole idea that we can share this cross-generational sort of common thing that it I don't know, it's cool. It's cool to go watch a movie, and then we sit around afterwards and we have our lunch, and what about this? What did you like? And we're just chatting. And regardless of, sometimes people can't connect with their kids or their parents or whatever have you, and then there's Star Wars. And it's just magical. And to your point, Tex, and I don't think that George Lucas could have ever predicted this. But to witness it in real life, regardless of what happens on Twitter or YouTube or whatever have you, to see how fans who don't know each other, they see the hat or they see the shirt, and they're just like, hey, kindred spirit. And yeah, they may get into an argument later on if a little alcohol is involved, but but Han shot first or whatever. No, it was Greedo.
McClunky, yeah.
Exactly. But it is. It's truly magical. It's truly special, and I think we're getting to a point where it's not as divisive as it was 2 years ago. I think we're with The Mandalorian, which I think it makes it a little more special with me, is that I didn't even know a guy at work even watched Star Wars. And he's like, hey, dude, Mandalorian tonight, first episode. I was like, what? Hey, I think we're friends. Did we just become best friends? I think so. Yeah, no, it is. It's fantastic. It's fantastic to watch, and being in the theaters and watching tropes of kids come in with their parents, and that I don't know. I really appreciate that. It really resonates with me because I remember going to see Empire and Return of the Jedi in the theaters with my family, and to be able to pass that down.
Sure.
Like you were saying, 1,000 generations, to be able to pass down what was special about it, what I remember, to my family, my wife's a lost cause, but to my girls, anyways. I don't know. I just think it's cool. I don't think that there's anything out there that has ever been like or probably will ever be like Star Wars.
No, not at all.
Totally agree. I've got one of those wives too. I think she saw the first Star Wars and said, "Yeah, it's an okay movie," but then after that was it.
My wife did. She had no idea she was doing this. In fact, she told me a few months ago, she goes,
Yeah.
I knew that you were a Star Wars fan, but then the day after we got married is whenever she was like, I didn't realize it was every day.
When you started moving all your Star Wars stuff into the house, yeah.
Oh, dude, man.
Where'd all
I
this
have-
come from? You were hiding it when we were dating.
I've got the shelf on the wall in the corner, and then some posters are framed on the wall, and then it's kind of funny. She's like, these action figures I got today. She's like, really? I'm like, hey, it's my thing. It's my thing. I said I could be a lot worse. I could be way more annoying. Trust me.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys. So thank you very much for you guys responded to that call, taking over the podcast, and we had a lot of fun. I hope you guys had fun as well.
Oh, for sure.
Talking Star Wars. We definitely won't be this won't be the last time we do this. It's a lot of fun. But let's thank everybody in our chat. Richard had some really good points too. Trevor Beast, thank you for joining us again. Hi-Fi Hedge Dog, Bionic Belly Button, US Dutch Kitty, thank you guys. Salty Nerd was in the house causing some salt up in there as well, but we'll get to that. Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys very much, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. I don't know what time it is wherever you guys are at, but I know sometimes we have with the podcast we have kind of an issue with timing because I got Alex in Las Vegas, and then Brad is on the other side of the country, so it's kind of like a meeting of the minds here in the middle. But thank you guys so much. Any last thoughts, last words?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Can I give a couple shout outs? Is that okay?
Shout out, totally.
Shout out to Chris and Stephanie, to my wife, who, even though she thinks I'm a huge nerd, still loves me. My parents and my brothers, and then also my friend Trevor. Not the same Trevor in the chat, I don't think, unless he's got some undercover name I don't know about. And just pretty much everybody else. But other than that, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And as my shirt says, may the force be with y'all.
That's awesome. And you were talking about if we died now, we'd be okay about it because we live and breathe Star Wars. And I actually have it in my will to be buried with my Saber Forge lightsaber. So it's definitely part of our DNA. Part of our DNA. Guys, thank you very much. May the force be with you. And I usually like to cap things off. If you guys want to go ahead and do the same thing and say, that's the scuttlebutt, go for it.
That's the scuttlebutt.
That's the scuttlebutt, baby. May the force be with you.
All
May the
right,
force
guys.
be with y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, man.